Let's talk about topic number three, which is, we're moving away from a little bit of politics, but don't worry, we'll come back to that toward the
I
end.
don't think anyone's worried.
Apple has announced that they're delaying Apple Intelligence, the rolling out the rest of Apple Intelligence until next year, which is insane to me. They announced the iPhone 16 as the device for Apple Intelligence. They basically did a bunch of false advertising, pretending like the features were already there. They've been rolling out slowly over the course of, whatever, 6 to 12 months. And the features they have rolled out have been lackluster, to say the least. Some of them have actually been annoying. And Siri is still a piece of junk, like complete piece of junk. And the rest is not coming out until next year. I'm actually rethinking my lock-in into the Apple ecosystem. I saw a video the other day of showing the kind of the invisible pen where you can remove objects from photos. They're showing the Apple one and the Google one, and the Apple one is just junk. It just doesn't really work at all. And the Google one took a little longer, but it was brilliant. I've used Siri now. I'm trying to use Siri more. Every single time I use it, it shits the bed in some way. I think Apple is really struggling here. And the other rumor is that it's delaying their other device strategy. So they had this, you know, iPad style home device that would follow you around. Was the rumor, kind of a home center, home controlling surface. These are all dependent on a lot of Apple Intelligence stuff. And so there's also the rumor, or the analysts are reporting, that this is delaying their hardware strategy as well. Big deal for Apple, especially in the face of Alexa, Plus, and Google's announcements. They're moving quickly on it.
I think it's interesting. If you kind of look back at Apple over the last couple of decades, I think they have really gotten quite bad at software. They were never a pure software company. What they've always been really good at is crafting hardware with beautiful integrated software experiences. Now, I've been an Android user since way back because I worked at Google when Android first came out, and they gave me free phones, which is a good way to lock me in. But I think it's very clear, like in the early days of the iPhone versus Android, Apple had a hardware advantage, but they also had an integrated experience advantage. Beautiful software working well with beautiful hardware, and just a really nice user experience. I decided a few years ago to make the switch to Apple, to an iPhone, and going from a more recent version of Android to iOS was a really underwhelming experience. I don't think the software was better. In a lot of ways, I actually think it was worse. And after a year, I switched back to Android, and I really haven't regretted it. iPad is a weird bit of software where it still doesn't really make proper use of the form factor. If you look at macOS, it doesn't feel to me like there have been any significant improvements for the last decade. And so, reflecting on all of this, as you say, Chris, I feel like Apple's ability to build good software has really atrophied. And they still have the best hardware, and they have the legacy of software that they built a long time ago, but their ability to innovate on it and make it better seems to have really gone away. And I don't know when that rot set in. If we have any listeners who work at Apple, or who know people who work at Apple and understand what's happening internally, we'd love to hear from you. It's a bit of a sort of a closed system. You don't hear much from what happens inside of Apple. But I can't think of the last time that Apple has really impressed with a software release as opposed to a piece of hardware.
I'm hesitant to say. I think one of the senior leaders at Apple Intelligence is an old friend of mine, and so I would be a bit embarrassed if you'd watch this, actually, because I'm kind of ripping into it, and I'm sure there are a lot of factors inside the business that are making this very difficult. Look, it's hard to understand the Apple magic. There's a lot of factors to it, and it's not enough to say they're good at software, they're bad at software, or they're they're good at innovation, they're bad at innovation. They just have a very different focus. They're not interested in being first, and they're not interested in being the most feature rich. And they're not just a hardware company. And in some cases, the hardware isn't even, well, mostly it's better, but it's sort of like a Porsche-like philosophy. I'm a big car nerd, as a lot of long-time listeners will know. And it's this kind of inexorable, iterative improvement. And you're not supposed to feel like there's been much revelation. Most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, it's supposed to feel like creeping improvement that is somewhat subtle and nuanced, but
Yeah.
everything just works. And when you look back 2, 3, 5 versions, you're like, wow, this is really improved. I think the problem with Apple Intelligence is they kind of broke their own rule. They broke their own philosophy. They said, oh shit, we have to catch this moment. Let's make a bunch of promises. Let's build a bunch of software. Let's do a bunch of stuff. Let's pre-announce it, throw a bunch of shit at the wall, and try to catch this moment because we are in a big strategic risk here. And it's almost like what they should have done is done what Apple always does, which says, we don't care about the hype. We don't care about the noise. We're going to ship when we're good and damn ready. And we're going to ship thoughtful features that actually work. And so I think this is the part of the problem here is that they're not good at innovating and iterating quickly in large step function ways. They're good at incremental, very considered incremental improvement. And so, yeah, I think that's the problem here, amongst other things.
I mean, respectfully, you're somewhat contradicting yourself because I think what you're saying is that Siri has been bad for a long time and continues to be bad with the addition of Apple Intelligence. Siri was not iteratively improved towards perfection. It was neglected and it fell way behind the industry. I think in some ways iOS has fallen behind Android as a user experience. I think Apple Photos has fallen behind Google Photos. Apple Podcasts has fallen way behind Spotify. They own podcasts. It's named after them. Like they named the technology, and the use of Apple Podcasts continues to shrink. So I think this idea of iterating towards perfection, I think that philosophy served them well 10 years ago, but it has now become nearly a substitute for a failure to be able to truly innovate. And you say, well, you're not supposed to notice it's better, but if you look at something from 5 years ago, you'll notice the difference. Now, I think between an iPhone 4 and an iPhone 8, absolutely. Between an iPhone 16 and an iPhone 12, I think you find if you go back to an older iPhone with the version of iOS it had at the time, you wouldn't think this was way worse. And now I can suddenly see how they've shaved off all the rough edges. It's nearly kind of gone to this level of stasis where it's just like it's reached its terminus and there isn't any real move to go beyond what was there. And so Apple's technology it somehow feels dated in some ways.
No, I think this is the classic Android argument, right? And we're not going to get into a religious war, but
Yes.
I think the products they don't give a shit about definitely hit stasis, and they have not given shit about Siri for too long. That's true. They've completely missed the boat on the personal assistant. They've completely missed the boat on the home ecosystem, and the products they choose to not invest in go nowhere. But when the products that they choose to invest in have this slow, inexorable improvement, they don't improve in the way you necessarily want them to. If you're an Android user, you want more features, more power, more design changes, more whatever. They're only interested in the stuff that they believe matters. And so, for Apple Music, for example, what they believe matters is the quality of the music. So they just keep adding, lossless and spatial audio and a headphone that can do spatial audio and a hermetically sealed relationship between the headphone and the player and all this stuff. Now, I agree with you on the margin, which is this strategy kind of only works to its fullest degree when you have someone with taste and intuition and judgment in the business. And that was Steve Jobs and Johnny Ive. So it is definitely losing steam when you have an operations guy, a supply chain guy at the head of the business. Are they firing on all cylinders? No. Have they reached the terminus, or is this strategy not a great strategy? Also, no. If they're able to get back to having someone with taste and judgment at the head of it, and they're also not making the mistake of trying to take a step too fast with a Siri and a Apple Intelligence, I think there's still the potential for them to keep moving in the right direction. But yeah, they've certainly made a number of missteps recently.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
All right, those were our thoughts about Apple and Apple Intelligence and the way they roll things out. What do you guys agree? Is this Apple slowing down, losing steam, or is this just the way Apple rolls? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments.